Michael, lovely to meet you, and thanks for taking time to do this.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you and to be here with you today.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And it's kind of, I'm sure you get asked this all the time. You're Swiss born, obviously grew up in Switzerland, I would assume, but you developed this great interest in sharks. What kicked that off?
Yeah, that is a question I get often. I always say Switzerland is the country with the most sharks. Unfortunately, not the ones that need to be protected. I'm sure everybody will know exactly what I mean. Yeah, it's strange when you grow up in a landlocked country to be interested in the oceans and sharks. And I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I think there's a museum that's close by that actually has the largest naturalized white shark in the world. And so that's a museum where my mom would take me a few times a year. And obviously when you're standing in front of the shark, the white shark is 5.89 centimeters meters long. So it's a big animal that was caught in the 50s in the south of France. So I still remember and actually relive it now because I take my 8-year-old son, and I've been taking him for several years to that same museum. And obviously when you're small, it's even more impressive. So, and then in terms of, I think Cousteau definitely had a big influence on me. I mean, those were the only documentaries on the marine world that existed at the time. And so, yeah, Cousteau's on Sunday evening was kind of a must watch for me.
Yeah, I just exactly the same. That Sunday evening Cousteau slot could not miss it. It was just fantastic. It was interesting hearing you say great white caught off the south of France in the Mediterranean. You see, not many people actually know there are great whites in the Mediterranean. And I do remember some years ago, in fact, quite some years ago, there was what I think was obviously a great white washed up on the beach. And the authorities just totally flatly denied it existed. It got shunted away and hidden, and no, we don't have great whites here. Has that attitude changed now? Is it more well known, certainly within the Mediterranean countries, that great whites are there?
I still think all the countries around the Med are still working actively to not promote that. So they've worked really hard to kind of, no, there's no white sharks in the Med, when actually the largest white sharks ever, caught were among in the Mediterranean. So, but it's obviously not a very good advertisement when you're trying to attract tourists who come to the beach and enjoy the summer. So, but I think it's better known. But I still remember when I was 16 years old, I went on holidays with my parents in Greece, and I picked up this book of sharks in the Adriatic, and there was a picture of a white shark in there. So I mean, they do occur all around. Obviously, there is no more any large seal colonies that kind of act like a magnet on them. So there is, I mean, the place between Tunisia, Sicily, and Malta is kind of the one that's best known in the Med for having white sharks due to probably the big tuna fisheries that take place there. So it's a good attractant. But so yeah, chances of actually seeing one, I know many expeditions have tried, but yeah, to see one hasn't been successful yet.
The area you've just mentioned, I always understood that to be almost like a breeding area for great whites. Is that the case, or was that fiction? You don't know.
I'm always a bit. I mean, there's so many hypotheses that are done by scientists and other people about breeding areas and of white sharks, and I mean, to be honest, the one that's probably the most likely is somewhere in Southern California. They seem to catch and see a lot of juvenile white sharks. But all the others are pure supposition, I think, at this stage. I mean, there's no direct observation that's been made, and yeah, when you consider that those sharks can move, you know, when they're born, they're already bigger than most sharks. So I think, and we know they move a lot. I mean, at the moment, there's the white shark Nukumi that's you know, that's being tracked across the Atlantic Ocean. So I mean, they move a lot. So even if you see a juvenile somewhere, it doesn't mean that that shark couldn't have traveled, you know, several hundred kilometers from where it was born. So yeah.
In fact, you were doing genetic tagging and finprinting, and put an association between Australian and South African sharks. Stunning.
Yes,
that's a huge distance. That's fantastic. What was the relationship there? I mean, were sharks actually doing that journey and back again, or what was happening?
So I was lucky to go to South Africa in '97, and my first, I mean, South Africa was the first country to protect white sharks. That was done in '91, purely on a precautionary level, simply because less and less of the large white sharks were being caught in those years. And fortunately, with Dr. Leonard Campagno and others, they basically really, you know, made the government protect those white sharks. And so when I came in, it was a perfect timing, because there was no research conducted on any sharks in South Africa, really. The only researchers there were at the Natal Sharks Board, who were working mainly with dead sharks. So it was really a great place to, you know, the tourism was in its infancy. So my aim was to look at the population of white sharks, because obviously the protection was based on precautionary level, but we had no idea, you know, what the population size of those white sharks were. So initially I was tagging the sharks, but that didn't work really well, because those tags would fall off fairly quickly and would get covered with algae, and you couldn't read them anymore. So being an avid photographer, I obviously took pictures of those white sharks, as you can imagine, and very quickly saw, wow, they have really beautiful and very distinctive fin patterns. So I basically adapted what people have been doing on, you know, dolphins, cetaceans in general for decades, and adapted it to white sharks. The first step was obviously to make sure that you could identify the individual white sharks over a longer, you know, a fairly long period of time. And that's a technique I called finprinting, with regard to the, you know, finprint. And yeah, then a few years later, we were very lucky to have Dr. Ramon Bonfil, who was at the time working at the WCS in New York, and he managed to find a sponsor to basically come with satellite tags, which they're still very expensive today, and in those days it was you know, just as expensive. And South Africa, obviously, with the economy and you know, the value of the rand, unless somebody from you know, overseas would come, it would not have been possible. So we managed to tag about 50 white sharks in a period of 3 years. And, you know, most of them didn't do much. I mean, some of them just basically traveled a few hundred kilometers along the coastline. What we were really trying to find out is, well, it's great to have white sharks protected in South Africa, but do they move outside of the international, into the international waters? And you know, on the west side of South Africa, you have Namibia, and on the east side, you have Mozambique, and neither of those countries are protecting white sharks. So we wanted to show that they are not, which is obvious, but respecting national boundaries. And we had 2 sharks that swam into international waters and then into Mozambican waters, which was already, you know, great, because that's what we really tried to show. And then we had one white shark that did an incredible journey, and it was with a pad tag. So it's a satellite tag that doesn't transmit while it's on the shark. It's basically programmed to stay on the shark for a certain time. And during that time, it records the water temperature, the water depth, and has a little light sensor, which basically records the approximate sunrise and sunset time. And when you compare this time to an internal clock, you can then estimate where that shark is on the planet. So it works really well when the shark is moving east and west, less so when it's moving, north and south. And then this tag pops up, and then it sends all this data it accumulated via satellite back to the scientist's desktop. And so this shark we tagged, and it was I think it was on the 7th of November 2003. And the tag was basically scheduled to detach itself on the 28th of February 2004, so 3.5 months later. And I still remember I was at sea on my little research boat surrounded by white sharks, and Ramon calls me from New York and he says, "You will never guess where the shark popped up." And literally it popped up a few miles from the coast of Australia near Ningaloo Reef. So yeah, an incredible journey. And yeah, the story didn't end there. I mean, that in itself was amazing. But then it was a shark that I knew well. She was basically, well, at the time of tagging, she was just over 4 meters long. And I had known her for 5 years. And she came to the area I was working around Dyer Island every year she would arrive in July, August, and kind of, she wouldn't stay for a very long time, but I would see her on multiple occasions until November, and then she would disappear again. So when Ramon told me that, I was like, she'll be back here in about 6 months, in July, August. And on the 20th of August, she came back to South Africa. So she did that journey, that return journey across the Indian Ocean in 9 months, which is quite incredible. And obviously it's, coming back to your original question about, why do they, I think that was the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
a long introduction to come to
No.
So, I mean, animals they don't just travel for fun like we do, or like we used to be able to, should I say.
Yeah.
There's multiple reasons. I mean, one of the reasons would be that there is no food available where they are. So they have to migrate to find, the resources they need. When you look at, Australia and South Africa, the conditions are very similar. I mean, the food availability is very similar. Both of them present like rich waters with a lot of fish, with, marine mammals for the occasional snack. And then the second reason will be for climate. Again, white sharks are probably one of the most widespread species of sharks. You can find them in most temperate to even tropical waters. And the situation between Australia and southern Australia and South Africa is fairly similar too. So that's also another reason to go on a 20,000+ kilometer journey in a few months. And then the third reason animals migrate is reproduction. So that's kind of the only one that's left with us. And I don't know if I'm guessing that's the reason. Exactly what did she mate in South Africa to give birth in Australia, or vice versa? That we don't have the answer. But the one thing, the sad thing with this shark that we named Nicole after Nicole Kidman is that I had seen her for 6 years, every year on a very specific pattern, and then she disappeared, and she's never been spotted again. So, and the last time we spotted, we estimated her at about 4.3 meters long, which is just short of what we believe female white sharks to be sexually mature. So yeah, it was a very sad kind of, you know, did you do this journey every year? Or was this just a once-off? I mean, the pattern being so repetitive over 6 years kind of made me think maybe she's done this, you know, every year. Maybe she went to Australia every year. But then when she didn't come back, obviously this crossing across the Indian Ocean is a very perilous journey. I mean, you have millions of long line hooks in that ocean. You have nets. You have, I mean, there's targeted fisheries for sharks, targeted fisheries for tuna, where sharks obviously are a huge bycatch. So it's a very dangerous journey. So obviously there is a chance that she, when she left in November of 2004, that's the last time I saw her. Maybe if she did go back to Australia, maybe that's a journey that ended her life journey. On the other hand, I'm always trying to be an optimist, and one of the last few weeks before she disappeared, she had some really big bite marks on the side of her body near the gills, and as you know, shark mating is one where I definitely prefer to be a male than a female, because when you don't have any hands and you have to mate in water, you have to hang on somehow, and sharks that can be, maybe you've seen some footage of other shark species mating, and usually the male basically bites the female on the pectoral fin to hang on for the mating to take place. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe she just became sexually mature. Maybe she mated with a South African shark and then did maybe that journey back to Australia or somewhere else, and then maybe with maturity her pattern changed, and maybe she's living somewhere else now, maybe in New Zealand, maybe in Australia. But I know that many eyes are out there to look for that fin of white shark Nicole, because she had a very distinctive fin, so one that you could definitely recognize. It'd
be great to think she's still out there, but what one can only hope. With reproduction, so great whites give birth to live young. Yes. How long is that then? It's just, I had a conversation the other day about parenthood and that infinity between mother and baby. So with the great whites, is there any connection after birth, or do the babies just disappear, or do they hang around mother for a while?
There is no species where there is any parental care once the babies are born. So I would be very surprised if in white sharks that was any different. But of course, I mean, it's often something that I also like to say is with sharks in general, but especially white sharks and the shark from Jaws. A lot of people have this impression that we have entire books written about white sharks, and they are books, but there are some, many things we still don't know about that species, and nobody has ever seen a white shark giving birth or two white sharks mating. So, like I said earlier, it's like we simply at this stage have no observation of either of those behaviors. So, one of the best known species of sharks is the lemon shark, through the work of Dr. Samuel Gruber, who passed away a couple of years, and he established a Bimini Biological Field Station in the Bahamas, and he was studying lemon sharks for 40 years, and that little island of Bimini is a nursery ground for those sharks. So he's seen the live birth, he's seen the mating, not the mating, the live birth of lemon sharks, and I've swam many times with those babies who basically live for the first 5 years of their life in or very close to mangrove tree roots, basically hide them away from many larger predators. And then after 5 years, they start, moving out into the lagoon and exploring. And after 10 years, when they reach 10 or 12 years, when they reach sexual maturity, they'll move out. But in lemon sharks, the pregnant female is actually physiologically inhibited to eat a couple of weeks before and a couple of weeks after giving birth. And that purpose is for her not to eat her own young once they're born. So, I doubt very much that the white shark would swim around with his few pups once they're born. That would be a nice sight. But
yes, indeed, that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. Sorry. No, go ahead.
Sorry. I think, sharks, contrary of human babies who are completely useless and could not survive without us. If anybody who's seen a baby shark, it's amazing. It's just basically you take the big one and you just basically downscale it. Its teeth are super sharp, and they're perfectly attuned to their environment already, so they adapt to protect, using the environment. But they're perfect little predators already when they're born. So there is not much need in parental care there. And a white shark, again, these are estimates from the largest embryos that were found in pregnant females that were caught, and the smallest white sharks caught. But it is estimated that they're born between 1.2 and 1.45 meters long. So this is a big shark when it's born. It's already bigger than many other sharks. So I think from that point of view, it's the ones that actually are born have a good chance of surviving.
Yeah, of course. I was sorry to hear you say Sam Gruber died. We spent quite a long time there on his research station at Bimini making a film for BBC. And it was quite a remarkable place. The research going on there was excellent. And Bimini itself, the island was fantastic. There was this old hotel which nobody lived or stayed in, and I should imagine it's all built up by now as things are. But without Sam, I assume the research is still going on anyway.
It's he kind of, he was fairly ill the last few years, and he was also getting to a certain age, but so he made sure that his legacy would continue, and Matt Smuckle has basically taken over just over a year before he passed away. So the transfer happened, and the place is, this is where I started. That my first experience in shark research was there as a volunteer in the mid-90s, and for me, Bimini is my favorite place. Always will be, and it has changed a lot. There's a huge hotel development and resort that developed there, and
oh, really? My goodness. Right.
Yeah, I destroyed a lot of the mangroves in the northern part of the island. But the research is still going on, and they expanded now to not just lemon sharks, but tiger sharks, bull sharks. Bimini has become famous for the great hammerheads that can be seen there during the winter time. So they've also included more of the ecosystem. So looking at the mangroves and all the habitat basically. So no, it still is a great place, and some really interesting research. And one of the things that has developed I would say in the last 10 years, I find very interesting, because I still remember, working with white sharks in South Africa. You get to know those animals, and you're sitting there day in and day out on a small little boat. I didn't have any cage on my boat. The boat was too small, and but it was very small, so I was very close to the water, very close to the sharks, and especially those sharks that would return every year. You kind of like expect them, and you look forward to seeing them, and just basically when you spend that amount of time, and those white sharks just had, in those days, I say those white sharks had personalities. You know, you'd have the white shark that just stayed away, and you know, if you didn't make any noise in the boat, he would approach a bit, but he would always be very cautious. And then you have another white shark that would come, and I mean, some of them I think wanted to make love to my boat. They just always came to the surface. I mean, they poked their heads out of the water to kind of look at us, and you know, you could remove the bait from the water, and they would stick around for an hour, just circling the boat and poking their heads out, and just as curious as we were for them, they were curious to what this was. So, and in those days, it was kind of like personalities, and you know, yeah, maybe in chimpanzees and maybe dolphins, but sharks. And in the last 10 years, the Shark Lab has really there's several projects that you know were started on the personality of lemon sharks, and it's now fairly, you know, commonly accepted that those sharks have personalities that obviously have an influence on their behavior. But yeah, I think it's really it's something that I'm really happy about, because it kind of, you know, for some people, I would say for the large public, they always look at sharks just as these, you know, primitive creatures, and suddenly when you have something that shows personality, it also obviously is linked to intelligence to a certain level, and then it kind of becomes more approachable in a way. So yeah, no, great place to be in.
I think personality-wise, there are very few species I've ever come across, land or sea, that have not had a personality.
I agree.
And you only have to take that little bit of time to look for it, and it's there. I had
something I'm sure you've seen. I mean, the movie that just won the Oscar. You know, My Octopus Teacher.
Yes.
You know, and it's funny how, I mean, I love that documentary or film, and I think it's especially so nice because we really don't live in a very easy world at the moment. Not even talking about the virus, but many other issues that we'll have to face. And it's so nice to see a documentary that's so positive and so nice, and has a, you know, it's just a uplifting movie. And talking with a few people, I realized that, you know, some people like didn't get it, and it's like, oh, this is stupid, and yeah, some I was like, at first I was like, how can you not like this? I mean, it's positive, it's a nice story, it's beautiful images, of course, the story is really well told, and then I you know, coming back to what you just said, I think it's just, there are people in this world who have never had a connection to any animal or, you know, nature in general. And if you haven't had that, then it becomes very difficult to look into the eyes of a fish or any other animal and kind of see that there is something there beyond just, you know, breathing and mating. So yeah, no, I agree with you. I think most animals, you know, have personalities and probably more.
Yeah, it's so true, and it's, as you're saying, the people just don't take the time to look for it. It just reminded me of the Bimini talk. My associate, who I was filming with there at the time, actually got quite a serious shark bite from a lemon shark, and he always tells this story when he goes into the pub. And it's at the end of the story, he brings up his thumb, and just around his thumb is this perfect, neat little row of scars. And what he fails to tell everyone is the shark was only that long, you know, that bit him. And it was just after it was born, and it came out, and he went to like touch it, and it just went dunk like that. And it was, so
yeah, that's probably the most dangerous.
I know, but he dines out on it quite a lot. With research, especially shark research as well. I mean, the thing that as I see through my life is research continues on and on and on, and still we keep losing species or great numbers of animals of all sorts. Two things really. Is research actually contributing still to the possible survival of other species? Do fisheries governments actually take enough notice to act on what you're telling them?
Yes, definitely. I think, I mean, research is, you know, I personally moved out of research to be more involved in conservation and communication, but research is absolutely essential because it's the only thing that can, you know, it gives you the foundations to actually have some changes taking place in the fisheries and in you know, the large the important conservation conventions that exist, whether it's CITES or you know or others. So no, it's definitely yeah. The problem is obviously there is 1,250 plus species of sharks, rays, and chimeras in the world known at the moment. There's new ones added every year. And a lot of the research has taken for a long time place on very few species. You know, the more charismatic ones, the more easily accessible ones. And that has changed, I think, in recent years where there is, you know, species that kind of were neglected for a long time by scientists that are now investigated. But the problem still remains that for the you know, vast majority of species, there is very little information, I mean, research going on. You know, I'm not even talking about all the deep sea sharks, which are virtually impossible to study. And then, of course, at the moment, it's a problem that that's difficult to do research on some of those species that are, you know, which population are already doing really badly. So no, I definitely, I mean, I'm definitely convinced that research is primordial. But you know, it's the same as you could see this with your question. Basically, the same happens with climate change. There is so much research that shows what's happening, and yet politicians and you know, economists and et cetera, still find that 0.1% of research that basically suits their purposes. So with fisheries being a multi-billion-dollar industry, you know, with, I mean, you know, most countries that have fisheries are heavily investing in them to support them, otherwise they would die off. I mean, there's, you know, money talks, unfortunately. So yeah, no, research is essential. Without research, you can't have any proposals to list the species on CITES. But yeah, it takes a long time, and at the same time, you know, research on sharks is fairly, and when I say sharks, I mean sharks and rays and chimeras, but it's very recent. I mean, it's, you know, it started in the 50s, so it's the history of shark research is 70 years old. So so no wonder that we don't know as much as we know on other things, and plus obviously the difficulties of you know, of simply going, you know, exploring the water. I mean, the first 50 meters, fine, we can go on scuba, but anything below is fairly inaccessible by most people. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It worries me, or it strikes me often that in the future species will go extinct. I think, you know, consumerism still demands a huge toll from the seas, and you know, someday it won't be there, but we'll know all about it. You know, so, oh, that species, here's all the facts, here's all that, this is what it was, but it's not here anymore, but here's all the data. And I find that very sad. I find but it is down to people power. It's the consumer buying the products. I mean, I know a lot of it goes into fish meal for animals and other things, but basically it's a consumer going to the shops.
I think it's you know, I mean, always when I give presentations and so on, you know, I always talk about, well, I usually start, especially when I talk with kids, I ask them the question, so, you know, what's your favorite animal? And you know, there's various animals that would come out, and dolphins, of course, and then there's always the dinosaurs. You know, then it's a good way to come into that subject, because then I said, so have you seen a dinosaur lately? And of course not. And then I asked them, so do you know when dinosaurs appeared? And you know, dinosaurs appeared 250 million years ago. They disappeared 65 million years ago. So it's amazing. It always amazes me how many people find dinosaurs fascinating, because the human species has never seen a dinosaur. You know, fortunately, in a way, we wouldn't be here otherwise. And there you have an animal. I mean, sharks. They've been around for 400 million years, and they're still alive today. In those 400 million years, they survived 4 of the 5 mass extinctions that happened on this earth, where, you know, up to 98% of any animal and plant life disappeared on this planet. And here we come, humans, and in, you know, less than 100 years, we basically bring many species, many populations of sharks and rays, and many other animals and plants to, you know, to the brink of extinction. And it's for me, it's, you know, we always kind of portray the human species as this advanced super species that, you know, yes, we can go to the moon, yes, we'll probably go to Mars, yes, we're talking here thousands of miles away over a computer. It's all amazing, but, you know, for me, the you know, this, if we any species we lose is a bad record for our species. Yeah, so it's definitely something that I find sad, and obviously things are moving really quickly at the moment. You know, between degradation of habitats, between overfishing that's, you know, keeps on accelerating, and also especially fishery. I mean, commercial industrial fisheries is now moving into the deeper water of the ocean, where we know nothing about. We know more about the moon than we know about, you know, the deep waters of the ocean. So, and here we allow, you know, fisheries and you know, people looking to exploit the resources that are found down there in heavy metals and other resources. And then obviously climate change, and, you know, there's many problems that face us, and you know, one of those will probably kill us if we don't act. You know, with sharks, something that survives 400 million years. You know, they appeared more or less at the same time as trees appeared on land. That's how old they are, and something that survives that long serves a purpose. Nothing survives for 400 million years with no purpose. So, and, you know, you're a diver. I've dived in places where on reefs and so on, where I haven't seen a single shark. And to me, like, that's the first thing that, like, oh, there's something wrong here. This is not a national ecosystem. This is not going to work for long. So sharks have you know, an important role in playing in an ecosystem, in regulating it, and in keeping it healthy. And you know, some people say if sharks disappear, the oceans will die. That I'm not so sure about. But you know, there is some possibilities in there that, you know, the trickle down effect of regulating from the top. You know, if sharks disappear, some people announce that there will be an explosion of jellyfish and so on, because basically what's coming from top doesn't exist anymore. So, I mean, we simply don't know, and we're playing with fire.
I think we're seeing that already. I mean, certainly here, since the top predators are disappearing, thinning out, jellyfish and predators of jellyfish, you know, turtles, everything else. The amount of jellyfish I'm seeing now every year is just increasing a lot.
Yeah.
And of course, it makes perfect sense. You know, their reproduction ability is remarkable. So if nothing's going to keep them under control, then next time we go to the beach for our Sunday swim, it's going to be like North Australia. You're going to have to wear a suit for jellyfish protection. It's and those sort of facts rarely come out on media, so that general populations get to learn about this stuff, which is very frustrating indeed, because the media only like to report big headlines, you know, which is tragic. Diving with sharks, I still, even after all these years, just get an absolute thrill with when I see a shark underneath. Is it the same for you still? Do you get a buzz from it?
Well, especially now, I think it's the longest period in my adult life that I have not seen a shark. Well, it's been a year and a half nearly. So I sometimes feel like my dog when you know, when you go for a walk, and especially when you go to the lake and he shakes all around from the. So yeah, no, I'm definitely, yeah. My favorite place in the world is when I'm down there, whether it's on scuba or just snorkeling and surrounded by sharks.
Yeah, it is a hell of a feeling. It kind of sets up your adrenaline for the day. I mean, even if you know you're quite safe, you still get very excited. I absolutely love it. Okay, it's been fantastic chatting with you. Thank you again for sharing all that with us. What's next in line for you, research-wise? You got something that you're particularly looking at?
Well, like I said, I'm kind of moved out of research, so
Okay.
I'm more into the conservation. I mean, I'm still involved with a project that basically looks at the finprinting data. So I've worked for the past decade with different people, but then I found the right people in Bristol, who basically developed a software-based system that is able to recognize a fin in a picture and then identify that shark and match it to all the others. So we started with South Africa. So all the people who have worked with white sharks in the past for the past 30 years have basically thrown in all their data into that system, and so that's still a project I'm busy with. Not, you know, I obviously gave all my data in there, so at the moment it's more kind of completing some of the data that's still missing out of that data. But so that's one of the projects I'm still involved in actively, and then I serve on the board of directors of the Bimini Biological Field Station, so that keeps me also in the game there, and I'm also I mean, those positions are all volunteer, but I'm also on the IUCN Shark Specialist Group and handling their communication. So yeah, and obviously working with you know, many researchers that are around the world. But yeah, so in the future, I'm looking to my next adventure. At the moment, it's a bit difficult with the virus that kind of limits your travel abilities, and but I definitely hope to remain active in that field, because I think that's, you know, I just want to make a difference where I can. So.
Amazing. Yes, fantastic. Well, I hope it's not too long before you manage to get in the water. We're just starting. Our lockdown is finishing here theoretically on the 17th of this month. So, you know, people will be getting into the water again on full scale. So is it the same for you? Have you got long to look for before you is it travel?
We never had a lockdown here. So we always were kind of in semi-confinement, but yeah, so no, I mean, I can go dive in Lake Geneva, but unless I get some of my genetics scientists to genetically modify a shark to live in Lake Geneva. I'm not going to see a shark very soon.
Yeah. Well, Michael,
it's obviously still difficult to travel, so
travel is a thing, isn't it?
And also a bit, at the moment, I think it's best to stay where we are, each of us, and not spread our virus to, especially to places where they've been fairly immune to it. Not immune in the sense of the virus, but just where they haven't been impacted yet. So I think it's but at least now with the vaccines, we can see the end of the tunnel, which I'm hoping comes up swiftly, and I will definitely be back in the water as soon as possible.
Well, fingers crossed for that, and brilliant. Well, look, you take great care. Good luck with the future, and thank you again.
Great to talk with you, and fantastic. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye now.
Bye-bye.